Warning: the following program may contain material not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you. Wake up and remember.
On this episode of Let's Find Out, take a moment and think on everything you believe about monsters, myths, and cryptids. What if it were all true? Now, what if the entire history of the world was secretly built on that hidden truth? Welcome to the Cryptidverse. Discover a world where lines between history and legends blur. All this plus more. Please welcome our new friend and first-time guest, author of the book, The Eloise Strain, S.E. Wilt. S.E., my friend. Welcome to Let's Find Out.
How's it going?
I'm doing great, man. Happy to have you on. As we were talking in the pre-interview, that I've actually seen you twice before this show. The first time is when I actually met you. We were in Hagerstown for our Snarly Yow event. It was halfway to Halloween over at the brewery, and it's one of those things where you set up for these events and you're a vendor. Sometimes you got to do a quick 5-10 minute walk, meet everybody, and go back to your own booth, especially if you're by yourself. You don't have nobody watching your stuff. And I saw you again a couple of months later, 2-3 months later. In fact, at this point in the game, that was almost 2 weeks ago now. And halfway to Halloween, another Snarly Yow event. And I didn't get to talk to you because, again, you were setting up your booth. And so how did those two events go for you, man? I think they went pretty well.
Oh yeah. All the events have been, every event that I go to so far have been really good. Sales aren't always like part of my thing is I'm not so much about, like, don't get me wrong, I want to sell books, but at the same time, I've had just as many actual sales at an event as I have as people have. They've screen capped or scanned the QR code on my advertisement poster, and then they'll order either an e-copy or a physical copy from one of the places that's available online. So, and my thing is I like talking to all the people that show up at those events, because that's actually led me to more sales just by talking and being genuine, and also gotten some interest because people start talking to me about, do you got something else coming, and tell them about it, what the next thing that's looking like I'm going to write, and hey, take my email, let me know when you're done with that. So it's great. I like all the events. So far, knock on wood, there has not been one that has been any kind of issues other than being a little cold at the last one.
Yeah, and then cold, and sometimes those wind gusts. Sometimes you got to hold on to the tent and your merchandise at the same time. I don't know if you had that experience before, but it was quite challenging. But with these events, I'm not too much worried about sales. I like having that connection with people. A lot of people come up to the booths, they have their own stories, or I meet other authors and I ask them to come on the show. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. It kind of works both ways. So all good stuff, and Snarly always puts on great events. So let's get to it, my friend, because at this point, how long has the Eloise strain been out?
So it actually went published, available to the public to be purchased. So the ebook was February 16th, and the physical copies were March 16th because of a minor hiccup in the publisher that I use. I didn't realize that I had set they have settings for when you can do different things, like if you want all the available things, like if it was an audio book or whatever, to all release at the same time or have them staggered. And I didn't realize that I had it set for a 1 month stagger. And then I found out, but then by the time I found out, it was almost the 16th anyway, so I just let it go. So it's been out now, 2/3 of a year, I guess.
And the cover pretty much sets the tone of the book, and a lot of other things, the artwork that you sent me. Now, gets me the question, because we're talking about monsters, myths, and we also talk about cryptids. Also supernatural, paranormal themes here. What got you interested in the topics of cryptids? Now, were you always a fan of, let's say, documentaries about cryptids? Have you ever seen one? Do you know anybody has had any encounters of sorts?
So I guess I would have to say that before I knew what the term cryptid was, which was when I was pretty young, um, I've always had an interest in that kind of stuff. When I was so just as to answer your question, but to give you a little bit of backstory, my mother worked for 40 years in the publishing industry, and I essentially grew up in a library because the company that she worked for, she got to see advanced copies of books, and then um, in the printing process, they always print like two, three, four, 500. It just depends on how many the book publisher wants the printing company to make for quality control. And the quality control ones, sometimes they get sent out with the rest of them to go to stores and things like that. And sometimes the author will say, "Hey, I want a certain portion of these because I want them to maybe give to friends or whatever." And luckily, because of the job that my mother had, she not only usually got free copies of books, but also one of the printing companies, every 2 to 3 weeks, they would have this thing called book sale, and anybody who worked there could buy hardbound books for a quarter and paperback books for a dime. And 99.9% of the time, there was nothing wrong with them. They were just extras. They were the ones a lot of times of the quality control printed books that there was no specificity as to what was supposed to be done with them. So then they would just sell them to the employees. Our house, it was like a library. There were bookshelves everywhere, and there were stacks of books in places where there weren't bookshelves. And I was allowed to read basically whatever I wanted. And one of the first books that I remember, um, really young, that my mother gave me was this big hardbound book, about yay big, and it was probably, I don't know, inch thick maybe, and it was nothing but stuff like the Loch Ness monster, Bigfoot, uh, all that kind of stuff. There was a little bit of a section about UFOs and a few other things, some other historical questions, like, could Atlantis have actually existed? So it was kind of like a cornucopia of that whole like fictional kind of what if genre, I guess you could say. And that was one of my favorite books growing up, because when I was young, because of the fact of that, it seemed like no matter if I had read a part before or not, and I would read it again, it seemed like there would always be some little nugget that I would pick out of it, or something that would maybe tie to something else. Plus, it had beautiful illustrations in it. And I had that book all the way until I went to go off to college, actually, and then something happened to it. I lost 2 boxes of some stuff, which one box was a box of books, and to this day, I have no idea whatever happened to it. But I think that that's kind of where it started in terms of my interest, because I've read almost anything. I love all literature except for, honestly, to be completely honest, romance novels. I tried, I just can't. It's not my thing. But documentaries, historical, Western, I love the written word. But I've always kind of been more heavily towards that side, like the Stephen King type writing, the Lord of the Rings. I was reading George R.R. Martin before most people ever even heard of him, when he first started publishing. So that I kind of always lean towards that side. As for your question about seeing anything, completely honestly, I believe in my life that 3 times I have seen something that I cannot. And you ask any person that knows me, I am a everything can be explained type of person. But I have seen three things in my life, once when I was pretty young, once when I was a teenager, and once when I was in my mid-20s, that I have no possible explanation for. What I cannot rationalize it, how any of it would have been possible, or what it necessarily even was. And I've never been a drug user. I've never been an alcoholic. I've never been any of that kind of stuff. So I know that none of those things would have ever had influence on what I may or may not have seen. And in one of those instances, there were three other people that were with me, and they saw the same thing that I saw. And it became a topic of conversation afterwards that, to this day, basically they all still kind of are like, we've talked about it a few times, but it's one of those, because nobody wants to try, and they can't rationalize it. It's a bit of an itchy subject, I guess you could say.
Well, hold on now. They're not here, so it's you and I right now talking about this event. No, I'm kidding. So, without making you feel uncomfortable or anything like that, what do you think it was? What is the Can we go over that story? Give me like the Cliff Notes version of it, if it's okay with you.
So the Cliff Notes version is me and three friends, 2 girls and a guy. I don't know if you know, there's a place in Harpers Ferry called Maryland Heights. We were up on it overlooks the river, and if you stand on the edge of Maryland Heights and you look down, there's a train tunnel that comes out of the side of the, I don't want to call it a mountain, but the rock face. And the train tunnel comes out and it goes into Harpers Ferry. Well, if you look down, you can see from Maryland Heights, you can see the river and you can see the train trestle that runs out. We were there. It was I want to say February-ish. Let me just say this ahead of time. It is illegal to be there after dark because it is federal property. It's part of a park. We, however, used to go up to Maryland Heights, not really doing anything. We were in college. We weren't really doing anything. We just to go up there because it was a good hike, and it was at night, and it was a pretty view. It was a very bad snowstorm. A very bad snowstorm. We were up on top of Maryland Heights, and I had this very odd feeling, and I'd had it before in my life, and I can't explain it. I don't know how to say it, what it would be, but I had this feeling, and I turned around, and there was a man who was about my height, who was wearing what looked like a long black trench coat. He had a cane, not like a traditional like hook style cane, but like a regular top cane with some type of something like a white top or something on it. He was dressed in, I would say, nice clothes, but they weren't like, it's not like he was wearing a business suit, but it was something akin to maybe that. He was bald, no facial hair, no eyebrows, and his skin was as black as possibly could be. And he was just standing there, and it kind of caught me off guard because it's snowing its ass off. And we knew that there's 2 ways up to Maryland Heights. There's the Parkway, which is like a 45-minute hike, and then there's another way which is incredibly dangerous, which is like a 15-minute hike. Well, there was no way that we would have heard him coming up behind us. And I said something to my friends. I was like, "Hey, we have company." And they turned around and they all standing there, and my buddy was like, "Hey, we know," because I guess he might have thought he must have been, and it was obvious this person was not a person. My friend was like, "Hey, we know we're not supposed to be up here, blah, blah, blah. We were just going to leave." And the guy lifts up his hand, and he's got like a cigar, and he takes this drag off of his cigar, and he's just looking at us. And behind where he was standing, there's the Maryland Heights at the top of it. There's some pretty big rocks that are kind of around. And it's like he put the cigar out on the rock. He turned around, and then he walked into the face of the rock.
Wow.
And we all saw it. Like, everybody saw it. And it was weird. It was strange. We all decided it was time to get the hell out of there and leave. But before we left, one of the friends that was with me, the one young woman, we walked over to where the spot was because she was like, "This has got to be a trick. This has got to be a joke, something." We go walking over there, and I'm like, "I'm telling you, I've been up here before. That is not a hollow rock. That is not." And the place where it looked like he put the cigar out on the face of this rock and then walked into it, there was a black burn mark, like somebody had smudged out a cigar. Now, there was no cigar laying on the ground because we would have been able to easily spot it because, like I said, it had been snowing its ass off, and there was like 3 or 4 inches of snow on the ground. So there's no way that was hiding. Didn't see no cigar, but there was a black mark. Oh. And she was like pushing on the front of it, blah, 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 blah. And she was like, "Okay, it's time to go." And we left. And, for years, I still see some of those people now and again. And for years, every now and again, the subject does come up, and I have no issue with it. They're all birds of a different feather. So,
sure, and I can understand if they might be uncomfortable telling their stories because they're scared of it, or maybe they don't want to tell anybody because they don't want people thinking they're crazy, right? And this is kind of, in a way, in the world that we're in, sometimes we hear these stories. I never think anybody's crazy because, I can understand where they're coming from. Now, you said this is in Harper's Ferry area, right?
Yep. Up on so in Harper's Ferry, above Harper's Ferry, part of the parkland over there, you can see it. If you're in Harper's Ferry, you can see it from almost anywhere. You can see where the train trestle comes out of the mountain, the side of the cliff, the mountain, whatever you want to call it. And then up above it, there's this big like overlook. And that is called that's part of federal lands. It's part of the park. And like I've heard from other people who have been up there and they've seen stuff, nothing like that, but they've had some odd feelings, some other stuff up there at that same place at Maryland Heights. So
now, is that close to a location of, and I might be wrong, I'm pretty sure I might be, but you said a train, where the story of Screaming Jenny comes from?
Where the what?
The story of Screaming Jenny.
I do not know, honestly.
Oh, we'll talk offline about that story. That's a really good story. It'll freak a lot of people out if they're ever walking around them train tracks. But it makes sense. Harper's Ferry is like one of the most haunted towns in West Virginia anyway. So the fact that weird stuff's going on there, it makes sense to me, my friend. I'm not too far from it, tell you the truth. And it might be something to it. It might be a field trip time for me to go and explore. Just not in the snow. I don't do cold very well. So now we get into the topic at hand, my friend, right here with the Eloise strain. When do you start planning the plot and the story for this book?
So the funny thing is I have a friend. She's actually the person that I share a booth with at the events. She makes handcrafted jewelry. Well, 2-ish years ago, she was part of a paranormal investigation group. And they had decided, her and the other lady that had founded it, they had decided that they wanted to try and maybe do a podcast or something. So she put this call out on Facebook and she said, I just need somebody who can write because I'm not very good at writing, blah, 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 blah. So I said, hey, because we were friends, we'd known each other in high school and in college. And I said, let me take a crack at it. And she said, okay. And I said, is there anything in particular? And she was like, well, we're kind of looking to wanting to do something that's like a story. She said, like an episodic story. And she said, but it needs to be, cryptid, paranormal focused. I said, okay. So a little bit of time went by. I wrote out, she said she wanted it episodic. I decided I was going to do it. I would just write it out as chapters. I wrote out like what I was thinking would be like the first two, kind of like the hook chapter and then the following chapter. And I sent them to her. And she shared them with this other person, and they both came back to me and were like, "Hey, this is really good. We want you to continue this, but you might want to make this into a book because this feels like this could be something that could go on to be." And I was like, well, I was trying to write something for you guys for this thing that you wanted to do on YouTube. And she was like, no. She's like, look, we'll look at that. She's like, but I think you need to look at going further with this. And I said, okay. So I started doing that. And so it was about 2 years ago. And I had never heard the term before. George R.R. Martin said once that he is a Gardner writer, that he knows where he's going to start. He knows pretty much where he wants to end, and he knows where there's some major points that he wants to hit, but then he just kind of starts and lets the story and the characters and everything evolve and grow. And then he kind of has to like prune back as he needs to hit those points. And sometimes those points might change a bit, but he ultimately gets to where he wants to be at the top. Well, that's kind of how I am as well. I know where I want to start. I know where I want to end, and I know kind of the key points that I want to hit in between, and then everything else just kind of between those points just kind of grows and whatever. And that's just how I write, and that's how this came about. And it's part of the reason why it took me so long to write it and then to publish it, because I did 2 or 3 chapter reorders. I ended up changing one chapter and making it the prologue. There was one chapter that I had to completely cut out because my test readers were basically like, hey, this is really good, but it seems a little too adult, said. And after I went back and kind of reread it and tried to look at it I went, you're right. And I found a way, because the chapter was important and it showed a very important relationship in the book. I went in and I rewrote it, and I did it so that 99% of that adult stuff was out, but you still got the idea that this was a very important relationship between these two people, and the type of relationship that it was, that it's not really like a friendship relationship. It's more like a midnight booty call relationship. And
yeah,
one of those. So, but it was important because I needed to show that those characters weren't, not necessarily that they're not friends, but it's more of a, I hate to say transactional, but kind of more of a transactional type relationship in a way. So, but it took me a little bit of time. Like I said, it took me about a year or so of writing, and then changing the order of some things. And when you do that, sometimes you have to go in and change some other stuff. But for the most part, other than that, it was just chapter. And I treat it like a job. I sit down, I write, I make myself sit down, write, and writer's block is a real thing. And people don't understand that writer's block is a real thing. And I learned that, and I've known that, but I really learned that with that, because there were times where I wanted to sit down and write, but I was still kind of like trying to figure out how I was going to maybe get from this step to that step from where I was, and not go a mile away to get there. But I would make myself do other stuff. I'd go back and edit, do like an editing pass for spelling and all that kind of stuff. So, it was about a 2-year process in total.
wow. Because I know that part of the description, there was talking about a mix of mystery, terror, and a bit of romance. I think the romance part, you have to bring it back to like a PG part, right? Do the test readers?
I would say, in all honesty, it would probably be like a PG-13 plus. It's not R, but it's also not like PG-13. It's somewhere between PG-13 and R. And it's closer to the PG-13 rating than it is the R, but it's still not the PG-13, because there is some violence in it. And while here's my thing. I love horror. I love paranormal. I love all that stuff. I do not like gore. It serves no purpose to me. It never has. Now, I know there are people out there that love that stuff and they get off on it. And hey, each to their own. I will not write that. I don't want to write that. I don't want people. I feel that I can create tension and create fear and anxiousness and things like that are way more effective than writing about gore. Now, but like I said, there is some violence, but it's not to the level of like R-rated. Not really common.
True. Now, that could be challenging, especially in writing a horror book when it involves certain levels of violence. We were talking about creatures. Some that look like zombies. Some are cryptids. Some are like a chimeric type of creature. So I think that it's even more challenging to draw it back a little bit, because I like some horror movies too. And I think at one point when I was younger, the more violent, the better. As I got older, there's a certain art on how to tell a story. Let's just say about I don't know if you're talking about a murderer or like a Jason or something like that, and not give it the gore porn feel. You could actually do it in a way where you might not even need that.
Right. And my view is there are a few parts during some of the violence where there are some things that happen, but you don't need to be super descriptive about how something looks in order to get the effect of it. If you write it correctly, if you use the right words, if you use the right setup, you can be more effective with your description of the scene and how and things like that than by just writing an exact description of what you and I know that probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but there's one scene in particular in the book that I took a lot of care to write because I wanted to make sure that people got because it would be a horrifying scene to walk into. It would be a very horrifying scene to walk into. But I tried to get it to convey that there's horror to it and there's fear to it, and there's anxiousness to it, and there's all the other things that it would be. But those same things, just by a few small sentences of some descriptions of a few things that are not gore, but are, let's say, gore adjacent.
Sure.
Create that feeling.
And it seems like you balance it very well. So now, if somebody were to come to you and ask you, because now we're going to get to the description of the book, the Eloise strain.
It's
what does
funny.
That mean?
It's funny. One of the first books that I sold at an event, this woman said to me, she said, I'm looking for a book for my niece. She said she's 13. She said, would this be, because she bought 2 copies. She bought one for her and she bought one for her niece. And I told her, I said, well, I tried to explain it to her, and my booth mate, she was also one of my beta readers and everything. She told her, she said, I've read it. I don't think it would be. She said, but the best thing I can tell you, and I told her, I said, the best thing I can tell you is maybe, I said, I would say this, and I flipped through the book and I pointed out a particular chapter and I said, read to this chapter because it's not that very far in. And I said, read to this chapter. I said, once you read that chapter, that's the kind of like the I guess you could say the most graphic, the whatever you want to call it, the worse that it gets. I said, if you read that and you don't feel that that's a problem, then give her the other copy. I said, if you read that and you feel that's a problem, I said, all you got to do is contact me and I'll give you your money back. And a couple of it was about, I want to say it was about a month later, she contacted me via email. And she said, hey, I wanted to thank you. I made it to this part. She goes, and I read it. And when I got done with it, I immediately went over to my sister's house and gave my niece the copy of the book. She goes, she's already farther through it than I am. She said, and she's loving it. And I was like, well, that's great. That's good. I'm glad. So and she said, and I asked her, I said, tell me, I said, as an adult, do you feel that it's ratcheted back too much? And she said, no, I think you've got the right feel for it, because she said that the chapter that you were telling me about, she goes, I get what you were trying to do. She goes, and it is horrifying. And she goes, and it is, it's very anxious. It's very suspenseful. She goes, and you were very good about that. She goes, but at the same time, I get that it would be a very terrible thing to walk in and see. So I felt good about that.
That's great feedback, and actually you performed it very well. So that's a great thing. So with the premise of the book, plots, I don't like to give away too much stuff. I like people to actually read the book or download it and meet you in person, get their own autographed copy if they can. Eloise Complex, it's in Michigan, right?
So in real life, you have to look at the Cryptidverse series that I've created. The Cryptidverse is based on I'm going to assume you and anyone watching would understand what parallel universes are. In real life, in our world, there's a place in Westland, Michigan. Now it's just outside of Westland, and it's called the Eloise Complex, and it's existed since the mid 1800s. It quit functioning in the mid 1900s, but it's essentially its own town. It's 905 acres. It has everything that a town would have: a police station, a fire department, its own power generation, its own water filtration. If you can think of it that a small town would have, they have it. And they were a self-sustaining place. They have a cattle farm, a pork farm, a goat farm, a dairy farm. They have orchards. They grew vegetables and stuff all year round. They grew winter stuff. So they were self-sustaining. At one point, there were 80 some buildings on the premises. Now there's only I believe it's 5 or 6. There's been everything from a sanitarium to a maternity hospital to a general hospital. It covered a lot of bases. It was a poor man's hospital at one point. In my reality, the Eloise Complex did not shut down. They kept up, and because the book is set in the early 2020s, and the Eloise Complex is a modern, functioning hospital complex that is essentially its own town. And so it has modern buildings. There's a place where it's talked about where there's almost like a strip mall type setup where they have food at one place and a wannabe Starbucks type place at another spot. There's a hotel, a multi-story hotel for patients and for visitors or patients' families and stuff like that. So it's what we would think of today as a modern big hospital complex, except it's a 905 acre small town all on its own. And in this universe, cryptids are, not saying that they're not here, but in this universe, they are much more of a real thing. However, the general populace is, for the most part, not necessarily ignorant, but let's say the things of sightings about Bigfoot and stuff like that, they're a little more often, but they're also tend to be a little more covered up. And so cryptids walk among us along with other things. And there are organizations and agencies that make use of that. Now, they're not that part of it. That's going to come in the next book where I'm going to explore some of that. But the Eloise Complex, the whole story takes place. Everything takes place all on the Eloise Complex. The entire book takes place there because it's such a large place. 905 acres gives you a lot to work with, especially when there's just the numerous amount of buildings that can be there, that are there. All the kind of the geographic area that you have to work with. So the entire thing takes place there, but it's also Like at one point I had planned on making part of it take place actually in Westland, Michigan. But I decided that like 99% of the book was all taking place on the Eloise complex. And I kind of said, I don't like that. This thing that I want to do, because it's something that was very important. It was a very, very important part of the book. I said, I can do this, but I can just do this there as well, because there's no reason that this thing wouldn't be there, because this place operates like its own town. So there's no reason that they wouldn't have a park, because the nearest park in our world is in Westland, Michigan. But I was thinking about it, and I was like, this place operates like a town. There's no reason that a hospital complex like this, especially a modern one, wouldn't have something that would be like, even if it was just a small to medium sized park, they would have, like, it makes sense to me that they would have something like that. So I just worked that into the rest of it, and the entire thing takes place there.
And building this world, because you have so many choices of cryptids that you can actually put into a story or combine them to make up your own creatures. So what kind of creatures are roaming around this complex?
Well, surprisingly enough, so not everything, I'm going to say this, not everything is a cryptid. Not every character is a cryptid. There are plenty there, because cryptids are, in this universe, cryptids are more common, but like I said, it's not like they're out in the general populace. Like, people just don't. I guess you could say that if you took our world and you just made it to where the idea of cryptids and cryptozoology was like 20% more accepted than what it currently is, I guess is what you might say. That people are a little more willing to believe that somebody might have seen a Bigfoot, but they still kind of go, I didn't see it, or whatever. So there are a fair number of regular people. There's a character who is not a cryptid, but is also not a person. I'm just going to say that, because I don't. Anything else is gonna be a little telling. Let's say that, but he's not a person. There is one of my main characters, or one of the first characters you meet is she's very stone-hearted. She's a very stone-hearted, very cold person. And I don't know if she would fall into the category of cryptid. I don't think that she would. But she's definitely a paranormal type being, and she's now. And just so we're clear, I did not make up anything or anyone in terms of cryptid or anything like that. I took from the pool of what is available throughout cryptids, legend, myth, paranormal type creatures, things like that. I just found ones that fit kind of what I wanted to do with the story and made them. One of the characters in the book, there's a cryptid that's called the Beast of Bray Road. That's a real cryptid. They are there's the Beast of Bray Road. There's a cryptid that's primarily a lot of the ones, not all, but a lot of the ones that I tried to use ones that were not so well known. Now, for instance, the Beast of Bray Road is something that's equivalent to what might be like a werewolf, but not quite. It's a little different. There's the Ozark Howler, which is a all the accounts of it are kind of questionable, because one person said that it looked like a giant bear, another person said that it looked like a giant cat, another person said that it looked something like a giant bear that had elk horns. So there's some fluctuation with what that one looks like. There is a Gorgon. there is a Gorgon. There is a person who is a hybrid of something. She's a hybrid. She's a hybrid of a person and a cryptid. And to be honest, it's all I'd like to say, because I don't want to give that one away, because she doesn't know. Up until a certain point, everybody, you just assume that she's just a regular person, and then you kind of find out, sort of not the hard way, but you kind of find out, and it's a shocker. But then it kind of, some things fall into place, and it kind of makes sense. There is the main bad guy, let's say, is so there's a couple of kinds of Wendigos. And there's the one Wendigo that a lot of people see that has like what looks like deer horns and the other stuff like that. There's another kind of Wendigo that is another Native American tradition. It's a smaller sect of Native Americans, but it's a curse. And when you're cursed with Wendigism, I guess it would be, you have this hunger that you can never satisfy. Your skin becomes very kind of like a garish green. You generally become taller, almost as if you look like you're stretched. And they're very ugly to look at. They don't have any deer antlers or anything like that. They're very humanoid looking, but they are also, it's very like I guess you could say, if you could take the word starving to death and give it a picture, that's what this tradition of Wendigo is. It's considered to be through the Native Americans that I was reading about that follow this tradition. It is considered to be like a curse, like the worst of all curses to be cursed with, because you have to be someone that is a truly evil and terrible person for them to want to curse you with it, because cursing you with it, just cursing you with it is an evil act that the shaman that curses you with it, then they suffer just for cursing you with it. And so the main bad guy is a Wendigo, but it's not the kind that most people associate like with the deer horns and that kind of stuff. It's a different tradition of a Wendigo.
Say no more, because I'm already on the hook, because you're already explaining a lot was going on with, not with just the characters, but what we're going to be running into as you read along in this story. And then you mentioned that you're doing a follow-up book to this as well, right? You currently writing this now?
So I'm in the planning stages of the next book. Now, just to be clear, so this first book is that every book I write, I intend to be a standalone, but it's all going to be part of the same universe. And one of the very, very last parts of this book, essentially the very last part of this book, the last few lines, gives you a clue as to where the next book is going to be. But it is not a continuation. It is going to be its own separate story, its own separate thing. I have been asked by numerous people if I am going to bring back any of the characters from the first book. My intention is to bring back one of them, possibly, but I am weighing that. I haven't decided yet. And the next book, which I'm right now getting all my research, and I've got a bunch of stuff done for it. I've got my plot. I've got my start point. I've got my end point, where I know where I want things to go and how to end. And I've got a few major hit points in the middle. I'd like to develop out and flush out a few more of those. And then my plan is, if all goes according to plan, the beginning of January, I'm going to start writing that one. And now that I've been through writing one, and I have a better understanding of how I write and what works for me and what doesn't, I hope that if all goes right, before the end of next year, that one will be published and out. And it will take place. I said, after I wrote, when I was writing the Eloise complex, I said, I love West Virginia. I always have. 99.99% of my family is from here. I live here. I love Western Maryland. I said I wanted to do a book that was based about West Virginia, all just as much as I could about West Virginia paranormal, West Virginia cryptid, Eastern or Western Maryland, maybe a little tiny bit of Pennsylvania, like the southwestern corner, and maybe a little bit of Northwest Virginia or Northern Virginia, maybe. But as it stands right now, most of my scene settings are in West Virginia, and there's one that is specifically in Western Maryland.
That's going to be great. And let's slow up a little bit on the Northern Virginia part, because traffic's scary. Let's slow up a little bit talking about Northern Virginia, because there's something much scarier than cryptids in Northern Virginia. That's the traffic.
Yeah. But well, no, I'm talking about the Frederick County, like the Winchester, that type Northern Virginia, not the close to DC Northern Virginia.
Oh, good. We're going to save ourselves a lot of headaches that way. No, but I'm kidding, of course. Even the other parts of Virginia have their own stories, other paranormal, supernatural, or cryptids. So that's something to explore down the road. But before we go, my friend, you mentioned something earlier. I've had this conversation. I might have had it with Fedora not long ago, maybe last year. I've heard it on different podcasts. There's a book that you mentioned that nobody knows the name of this book. They've seen it. I saw it when I was in elementary school, around 4th to 5th grade. That book is what got me interested in the subject of UFOs, Bigfoot, Loch Ness, and whatnot. What happens with those stories? Nobody knows the name of this book. They've seen it. They've read it. They've had it in their hands, and it's almost like the universe had disappeared. You mentioned you had a hardback copy of it. You lost it. Do you know the name of this doggone book?
No, I don't remember it. And the thing is, my mother remembers that book. She remembers it, but she doesn't remember the title of it either. And it's crazy because when I moved and I lost the 2 boxes of stuff. One box was a box full of role-playing game stuff, which was a hard loss. And the other box was just a box full of books that I had. And like I said, that book was in there, and then the second or third copy that I ever owned of this book called the Illuminatus trilogy, that was in there. And that's another weird book because I've owned 7 copies of that book, of the Illuminatus trilogy. I've owned 7 copies of it, and every time something happens to it, there's been 2 that I've loaned to people and I've never gotten back, which I never loan a book and expect to get it back. But 2 that I've loaned to people and never got it back. And then the other 5 I've owned copies of and have just don't know what happened to them. And it was like that hardbound book. I can still see the front cover picture. I can still see the front cover picture and the back cover picture like it was in my hands, but I cannot tell you the name that was on that book, and I wish that I could.
You know what? We're going to add you to the mystery bus because nobody knows what happened. It's kind of like the Mandela effect in a library.
See what I'm saying? In the Eloise strain, that book was actually the inspiration. In the Eloise strain, there is a book series that's talked about. It's a series of books. It's kind of like an encyclopedia set that's about all things paranormal, cryptid, all that kind of stuff. And there's a book series that I actually named, and it's an encyclopedia series, that the author of it is actually the author, and then with someone who's a contributor, are actually in the Eloise strain. They're in the book, but that book series actually plays an important role through the story. And I fashioned that idea off of that book. I called it the Encyclopedia Paranormica.
And that's the thing. This book launched 1,000 ships of people looking for cryptids or interested in the subject, and we can't find it. That's part of the mystery. That's part of the fun, my friend. Now, for our friends, the listeners that would like to learn more about you, where you're going to be next, and your books, where can they go find out?
So I next will be at there's an event in Berryville, Virginia on November 15th. It's like Christmas with Krampus or something like that. I think I forget because there's one in December as well that's got a very similar name. And I'd have to look and see what the date of that one. But if you there's a good friend, his name is Snarly Yao. You can find him on Facebook. He has a listing of he always posts about his events. If he has an event, I'm usually there. So people can also find me. I have a Facebook page, SE Wilt. I have a Twitter account, SE Wilt. I have an Instagram, but I just don't use it very much because, to be completely honest with you, I don't like Instagram. I just don't. I'm not a big fan of Facebook either, but it is what it is. So that's where people can find me. They can email me at author.s.e.wilt@gmail.com. It's on my Facebook page. There's a link to it through my Twitter account as well. And then, so the book, the Eloise Strain, can be found pretty much any place that you can buy ebooks. If you go to Google or something like that and you type in Goodreads or books to read at the Eloise Strain, it'll take you to a page that'll give you some more information, and it'll also give you links to any place where you can buy it. Hardbound, or not hardbound, but physical copies. There's only 2 places that you can purchase those from at the moment: Amazon and Barnes and Noble, or from me. You can order them direct from me. If you order them direct from me, I will sign them and put pretty much anything you want in them in terms of signing them, as long as it's as long as I agree with it. I'll put it that way. And very soon, the physical copies will no longer be sold online. They're going to be sold only through a online store. Well, they'll still be online, but they won't be through Amazon or through Barnes & Noble. They're only going to be through me, through my own storefront. The ebook will still be available almost anywhere, but the physical copies are going to be available only through my own storefront, because Barnes & Noble and Amazon, I did not know until I got into this. I mean, I had some idea, but I did not know a lot about the online retailer game that they have running when it comes to physical print books. And while I am not in this to make money, I am in this to entertain people. I would like to make some money off of it. And Amazon, I practically have to pay them to sell a physical copy of a book, even though it's a serious. I tell everyone who talks to me about wanting to get into writing, I tell them, I'm like, listen, your best bet, go I show them where to go set yourself up your own storefront. Here's how you can set up your own website, your own hosting. You can do everything for less than $40 for a year. And you can handle shipping and everything through them, and you don't have to deal. You can even sell your ebooks through it if you want to. Physical copies, you're best off doing your own thing. Like Amazon is great for exposure when it comes to ebooks and things like that, but physical books, they are not author friendly.
And that's unfortunate, but thank you for that. That's great advice. And for those who are out there thinking about writing their own book or an experienced author already, some great advice was just shared, my friend. Well, thank you for that. And when that next book comes out, you said next year.
Next year, if I can keep myself on my schedule and everything goes the way that I want it to, even with some, I try to plan in mishaps and things. If all goes right, it'll be by the end of next year.
So
or
then,
before the end of next year. I'm hoping to have it out by the time the Snarly Yowl's his event season really kicks in. So I'm hoping to have it done and published and have physical copies in hand by the time like September or October roll around. And if you don't mind, I'd like to give a plug for one more thing.
yeah, go ahead.
So I had this idea, and a couple of friends told me, you should run with it. So I started, there's a website that if someone's interested, they can go to. It's Contagious Words, and it's words with a Z. Yes, I know the 90s want their Z back. I've already heard that joke a million times already. It's called contagiouswords.com. And what it is, the website is the Contagious Words Collective. And I have started this website with the goal of anyone who wants to be an author and wants to write. I don't care if you want to write short stories, if you want to write magazine articles, whatever it is, but if it falls into one of the categories that this group wants to be associated with, then we would love to have you email us, come join us, talk to us. We're there. We want it to be there to be advice for people, to help other people to write. To my ultimate goal is because I don't want to make money off of anybody. I don't want to exploit anyone. I don't want to make money off of anyone. My goal is I would like that one day that website and that group is kind of like a name group that people that are writing about cryptids, paranormal, sci-fi, maybe some soft to medium sci-fi, fantasy, that kind of stuff, and they're looking for help. They want a collective group of people who might be willing to read or whatever else. It's a place that they can go, and the website will feature them. We'll show them their author stuff, what they've written, links to go see things that they've written, to their books that they've written, where to purchase them, that kind of stuff. And that's really what I really want to see that grow. I really do, because I didn't have anything like that. I reached out to people and surprised. This is the thing. A lot of people don't know this. And let me just say this. My mother worked in the publishing industry for 40 years. I got to meet a lot of people that were famous authors. I got to meet Stephen King twice. I got to meet Nora Roberts. I got to meet a bunch of authors, some big name authors, some little name authors. People give you advice. They tell you things when you tell them, hey, I'd like to write one day, and this, that, and the other. But one thing that I've learned is I've also met in the past 2-ish years, I've met a lot of people around here that are small name authors like me. And I would say to them, hey, what about this thing? Like, when you're editing, is there, are you doing it all by eyeball, or do you have like a program or something that you use it like helps you, tells you, hey, like, this sentence is like way too long, or do you have something? Because there's all that kind of stuff. And I've found that in the current climate, I guess, small name authors really don't seem to want to help each other. And I guess it's because there's so much competition out there. I guess that they're afraid that if they help you, their books aren't going to sell because your books are selling, no matter if you're in their genre of writing or not. And I was I almost stopped writing because of this, because I had questions about things, and I didn't want to, I had people offering to do advertising for me and all this other stuff. And 99.9% of that stuff is a scam. and I knew
Yeah.
some of that already, but it's kind of like walking into a room and with a blindfold on, and you kind of got to figure your way out. And while I don't know everything, and the people that are with me in this group that have signed on, we don't know everything, but we've had experiences. We've learned sometimes through trial and error, and sometimes through other means, and we all agreed that we want to help others to get them to be bigger. And if someone that came to us and we worked with them, whatever they wanted to help with, we helped them, and they went on to be somebody who turned out to be bigger than Stephen King, and I ended up being a nobody in history, I wouldn't care, and I wouldn't ask anything from them. I would be happy to know that they got where they got because they got help from someone who wanted to help them.
You're doing great work, man. And I understand contagiouswordswithaz.com has a Facebook page, and I'll put the links to that in the show description.
And we have an X page as well.
I appreciate you being on the show, man. I wish you much success, and I'll see you at the next Snarly Yow event.
Thank you. I'll see you then.
Thank you, my friend.
Copyright Diego the Podcaster. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out with Diego is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.